The night is deep, and this space is reserved for the truths that no one dares to touch. No Sleep Studio welcomes you all. Have you ever looked at a statue and felt as if it were staring right back at you? In tonight's episode of The Black Files, we will follow the tracks of a madman, one who doesn't sculpt statues from clay, but shapes pure terror from the flesh and blood of his own kind. A solemn bow to the souls listening to us. And so we begin our story. The sculptor of flesh. Any trace on the computer system. To the outside world, this case never existed. Those who were murdered seemed to have evaporated from reality. The director signed the order to seal everything immediately upon the local police's report. Evelyn broke the silence with her signature raspy and cold voice. "Tom, are you sure you want to take this case? Your psychological profile after the Skinner case still hasn't been fully cleared. Forcing yourself to empathize with a madman right now could push you over the edge." Tom didn't look over, his eyes still fixed and pinned on the dark road ahead. He reached out to turn down the radio. "If we don't go, Evelyn, the list of his statues will stretch on indefinitely. You've already seen the first crime scene photos. Those are not dead people. That is the ultimate defiance against humanity." Evelyn fell silent, turning to the next page of the black file. The Polaroid photographs appeared under the dim overhead light of the car. It was not merely a murder. It was a desecration of humanity in its purest and most extreme form. The victim was a young girl, found in a kneeling prayer position in the middle of a deserted church. But the horrifying thing was, her entire skin had been dyed a marble stark white with a special chemical compound. Her eyes had been gouged out, replaced by two deep blue sapphires that gleamed as if they were alive. The victim's mouth was sewn shut with barbed wire, fixing a frozen, eerie smile that screamed with inner agony. "He calls himself the Sculptor," Evelyn whispered, her fingers trembling slightly as she touched the edge of the raw plaster photograph. "He doesn't kill out of hatred, nor for the satisfaction of mundane desires. He kills to create art. He views the human body as a form of primitive clay filled with sin. And he believes he has a mission to purify and reshape them." The car stopped in front of a 3-story wooden house standing isolated at the edge of Blackwood Forest. This was the private residence of Arthur Pendleton, a retired art history professor who had just been placed under FBI surveillance after 3 of his female students mysteriously vanished over the past 2 months. The house was pitch black, looking like a giant monster with its mouth wide open, waiting for its prey in the darkness. The chill of the downpour seeped through their overcoats, but it was not as cold as the goosebumps running down Tom's spine. The instinct of an agent who had hunted monsters for 15 years told him, inside this house, something beyond the boundaries of madness was reigning and waiting for them. When stepping into the devil's lair, you will realize that the boundary between light and darkness is as thin as a single strand of hair. Beneath that basement, art and brutality have merged into one. They approached the main door of the house. It was unlocked, let out a soft, bone-chilling, long creak as Tom gave it a gentle nudge with the toe of his shoe. A strange scent immediately hit their nostrils. It was not the usual foul stench of decomposing corpses, but a bizarre mixture of formaldehyde, the pungent scent of scented candle wax, and the rusty iron smell of fresh blood that had not yet dried. The living room was empty, but on the walls, hundreds of charcoal sketches depicted human bodies that were deformed, dissected, and restructured according to strict geometric proportions. In the middle of the room, an antique phonograph was spinning by itself, the stylus stumbling over a scratch on the vinyl record, repeating a melancholy, distorted opera melody over and over. "Vesti la Juba." The weary singing echoed throughout the dark corners. "Tom, look up at the ceiling." Evelyn's voice suddenly cracked. She raised her hand and pointed directly upward. Tom flipped his flashlight beam high. Right above their heads, bolted tightly to the wooden purlins, was a complex system of pulleys. Hanging suspended from it, like puppets with severed strings, were countless human body parts linked together by thin chains. They swayed gently with each gust of wind blowing through the cracks of the door, creating dry, clacking, and horrific clicking sounds as they bumped into one another. A dull thud echoed from the basement. The sound of slow, steady footsteps, accompanied by the scraping sound of a metallic object being dragged across the rough concrete floor. Tom's flashlight beam locked onto the silhouette stepping up from the darkness of the staircase. Arthur Pendleton appeared. He did not look like the disheveled or frenzied serial killers Tom had faced before. Arthur wore a flawless, ash-gray three-piece suit, his hair neatly combed back, and his intellectual round-rimmed glasses reflected the flashlight beam. In his hand was a medical scalpel, its blade still dripping with milky white fluid mixed with crimson blood. He did not resist at all. Arthur smiled, a saintly and profoundly forgiving smile, then dropped the scalpel onto the floor. The sound of metal hitting the wood rang out sharply. He slowly extended both hands forward. "Welcome, my agents. You are a bit late. The fourth masterpiece has just finished its primer coat. I know you, Agent Sterling. You are the only one in that foreign bureau who understands beauty. You see the darkness, and you know that darkness is the only thing that is real." Tom rushed forward, brutally wrenching Arthur's arms behind his back, locking the freezing steel handcuffs around his wrists. He slammed Arthur's head hard down onto the wooden table. "Where are the girls? Arthur? Charlotte? Maria? And the girl at the church? What did you do to them?" Arthur let out a soft chuckle, the low laugh vibrating inside his chest. "They are no longer names, Tom. They have been liberated from their rotting mortal flesh to become eternal. They are down there, in my exhibition room." Evelyn Vance stepped closer, keeping a safe distance but keeping her eyes locked onto Arthur's expression. She pulled out her notebook, trying to maintain her scientific composure. "Arthur, you believe you are creating art? Is torturing and destroying the bodies of innocent young girls art?" Arthur turned his head, looking at Evelyn with clear disappointment. "Dr. Vance, a brilliant mind like yours. Yet you use such mundane words as torture. Humans are born as a flawed product of creation. We age, we become ugly, we rot from within due to filthy desires. I am merely using anatomical knowledge and art of the Renaissance to correct God's mistakes. I dye them white, fixing their souls at the exact moment they are at their purest. You call that destruction? No, that is salvation." Tom left Evelyn to guard the killer, while he alone held the flashlight and stepped down into the basement. The stairs leading down to the basement were steep and damp. The further down he went, the more suffocatingly pungent the chemical smell became. When Tom's feet touched the final step, his flashlight swept across the vast space of the basement, and his heart seemed to stop beating for a second. The basement was arranged like a professional sculpting studio. But the statues here would drive anyone mad if looked at for too long. There were 3 large stone pedestals arranged in a triangle. On the first pedestal was Maria, the female student who went missing 3 weeks ago. She was placed sitting on a stone armchair, her body completely naked but covered in a hardened ivory white chemical layer. Looking exactly like a plaster statue of Greek gods. Her eyes were wide open, her eyeballs having been replaced by 2 amethyst stones. All over her flesh were sharp geometric incisions, sewn back together with silver thread, resembling meticulous leaf veins. On the second pedestal was Charlotte. She was fixed in the pose of a spinning ballet dancer, but one of her legs had been severed by Arthur and reattached using a rusty iron support rod, forcing her to stand on a single, petrified toe of flesh and bone. Her face was pale, but her lips were painted with a dark red coat of lipstick made from clotted blood. And on the third pedestal, a girl was still alive. It was the final victim, who had just been kidnapped 2 days ago. She was tied tightly to a medical operating table, her entire body coated in a white solution that was beginning to harden. She could not move, could not scream because her mouth had been numbed stiff with drugs. Only desperate tears rolled down through the chemical layer, forming 2 long streaks on her face that was gradually turning into stone. Tom rushed over, using his dagger to frantically cut the binding ropes. "It's all right, I am FBI. You are safe now," he whispered, his voice trembling. But when he touched the girl's skin, he realized a horrifying truth. That solution was not just on the outside. Arthur had used a syringe to inject the hardening agent directly into her vascular system. She was petrifying from the inside of her body. From above the basement, Arthur's laughter echoed again, piercing through the cracks of the wooden floor, sounding like the devil's whisper right next to Tom's ear. "You cannot save her, Agent Sterling. The transformation process is complete. If you try to tear her away, the blood vessels will shatter. She is already mine." My masterpiece. The killer doesn't just kill with a scalpel. He kills his victims with psychological curses. Inside the dark solitary confinement cell, a breathtaking battle of wits begins. Let us skip the tedious procedures of the law. Agent Sterling, Arthur spoke first, his voice echoing steadily. Both you and I know that your so-called justice is merely a curtain masking helplessness. Let us talk about the essence of the final artwork. How did it feel when you saw that girl petrifying under your own hands? Tom slammed his hand hard onto the table. A harsh noise ringing out inside the narrow room. Shut your mouth, Arthur. You are a perverted monster. That girl died on the way to the hospital due to total organ failure. What did you inject into her? Tom tried to suppress his anger, but his eyes flared with terrifying veins of blood. His ability to empathize was automatically activating, forcing him to see the image of Arthur holding the syringe, slowly piercing the victim's vein while whispering gentle lullabies. That sensation made Tom want to vomit. Arthur shook his head, a fleeting look of genuine sadness appearing on his face. What a pity for your lack of patience. That compound is a perfect formula. $C equals X plus Y, SQRT, delta, dollar. Where $X is pure calcium carbonate and $Y is a biological catalyst of my own creation. It did not kill her, it merely fixed life into an immortal state. You humans always fear what you cannot understand. Dr. Vance, you are a psychiatrist. Do you think I am mad? Or do you see in me an evolution of consciousness? Evelyn Vance took a step forward. She sat down in the chair opposite Arthur, looking straight into his deep-set eyes. I do not see any evolution. Arthur, I only see a deeply traumatized child trying to control the world around him by depriving others of their lives. According to your childhood records, your mother was an addict. She frequently locked you in a dark basement and forced you to stand still like a statue for hours if you did not want to be beaten. Are you reenacting that punishment upon your victims? You want them to stand still. Because only when they stand still, they cannot abandon you. The smile on Arthur's lips suddenly vanished completely. His eyes narrowed, a cold and venomous glare like a poisonous snake darting out from behind his round glasses. The room instantly became suffocatingly tense. You think you are very smart, don't you, Evelyn? You think those cheap psychological theories in textbooks can decode me? Look at yourself. You diagnose me, but who will diagnose you? I can smell the scent of guilt on you. You also have a basement of your own, don't you? A basement where you bury the memories of your drowned younger brother whom you chose not to save, just to keep your parents' attention. Evelyn froze, her face instantly turning completely bloodless. The notebook in her hand almost dropped to the floor. Tom noticed the abnormality, and he immediately stepped in to interpose between the two of them. The interrogation ends here. Take him back to his cell. Tom shouted to the agents behind the door, but as Arthur was dragged away, he still turned his head back, looking at the two of them with an eerie smile. The game has only just begun. My friends, the sculptor is not alone. The real statues are still on display out there, right under your noses. The horrifying truth gradually unfolds as the FBI realizes they are not facing a lone killer, but a fanatical cult that regards death as a religion. 2 days after the interrogation, an unaddressed package was placed right in front of Tom's office door at Quantico. Inside was an old vinyl record along with a piece of parchment engraved with a line in dried blood. Art never dies. It merely transfers from one person's hand to another. When the record was placed on the phonograph, the familiar opera melody rang out again, but this time it was accompanied by the horrific screams of a man. Through audio analysis, the BSU identified that the scream belonged to Judge Raymond Miller, the man who had just signed the arrest warrant for Arthur Pendleton 2 days prior. Tom and Evelyn immediately set out for Miller's mansion in the suburbs of Richmond. When they arrived, the mansion doors were wide open. There were no signs of forced entry. The scene inside the judge's living room caused all the accompanying agents to vomit right on the spot. Raymond Miller did not die in his bed or on the floor. He was found right in the middle of the large dining room, his body arranged into the shape of a legendary sphinx. His entire back had been sliced open, his 2 lungs pulled outward and fixed with sharpened bamboo sticks to form the shape of a pair of wings, a brutal ancient torture ritual known as the Blood Eagle. His entire body had also been coated in a stark white plaster paint. His eyes replaced by two fiery rubies. Arthur is in a 24/7 solitary confinement cell under maximum surveillance. Tom stood before the body, his voice trembling with anger and horror. He couldn't have done this. There is a copycat, or an accomplice out there in the real world. Evelyn Vance stepped closer to the corpse, suppressing the psychological shock from the previous day's interrogation to carefully observe the incisions on the victim's flesh. It is not a copycat, Tom. These incisions are extremely professional. The depth of the blade is perfectly consistent. This is the craftsmanship of someone who has practiced hundreds of times. Arthur was not lying. He has an apprentice, or a kindred spirit within his cult. Evelyn used medical forceps to extract a small, rolled-up piece of paper from the judge's mouth. When opened, it was a geographical coordinate written in precise numbers. $38.8977 carat, circ, text, N. 77.0365 carat, circ, text, W, dollar. Tom looked at those numbers and felt the blood inside his body freeze. Those were the coordinates of a public park located right behind the Virginia governor's mansion. The killer was challenging them right at the center of state power. He wanted to turn the entire world into an exhibition room for his crimes. "We are up against a network of psychopathic criminals," Evelyn said, her voice freezing cold but carrying an ultimate dread. "They view themselves as apostles of death. Arthur Pendleton is merely the pioneer, the Messiah, within their frenzied minds. If we do not find the one who is out there, everyone involved in this case, including you and me, will turn into the next plaster statues in their collection." Tom stared intently into the ruby eyes of the corpse, empathizing with the victim's supreme agony before death. He heard the laughter of the second killer inside his mind, a younger laughter. Sharper, colder, and filled with supreme arrogance. The darkness spreads like a contagious disease. Every single step of the FBI agents is within the calculations of the mysterious killer. Who is the hunter? And who is the prey? The coordinates led Tom and Evelyn to a vast axe-shaped hedge maze garden located behind the governor's mansion at 3 o'clock in the morning. Thick fog obscured their vision, making the towering walls of plants look like the corridors of a green hell. The footsteps of the two agents stepping on the dry leaves echoed chillingly in the silence of the dark night. They went deep into the heart of the maze, where an ancient fountain that had long run dry was situated. At the center of the maze, under the dim moonlight, an eerie scene emerged. 4 human bodies were arranged around the fountain facing the 4 directions of east, west, south, and north. They were homeless people who had gone missing in the Richmond area over the past few weeks. All of them had been turned into stark white plaster statues, their poses replicating the 4 stages of human life: birth, aging, sickness, and death. The birth statue was a woman arranged in a kneeling position, cradling a round stone block. The aging statue was an old man with a hunched back, leaning on a cane made of human bone. The sickness statue was a young man curled up in agony. And the death statue was a corpse standing upright, with both arms spread wide as if embracing death. "This bastard, he is putting on a public exhibition." Tom gritted his teeth, the gun in his hand trembling. He stepped closer to the death statue and noticed a horrifying detail. The plaster layer on this victim was still not completely dry. He had just left this place only a few minutes ago. "Evelyn, watch out. He is still inside this maze," Tom shouted, immediately turning around to protect Evelyn. But when he turned back, Evelyn had vanished. There was only the thick fog and a chuckling laughter echoing from the pathways of the hedge maze. "Evelyn, where are you?" Tom frantically rushed into the turns of the maze. His flashlight beam swept across the walls of leaves, creating flickering ghosts on the ground. Inside his mind, his ability to empathize began to spiral out of control. He heard Evelyn's heavy breathing, the sound of a scalpel gently gliding across the fabric of a coat, and the sound of a warm, deep voice whispering next to her ear, "Dr. Vance, it is your turn to become the most beautiful masterpiece." Panic consumed Tom's mind. He fired 3 shots into the air to warn the perpetrator. But the gunshots were merely swallowed by the bleak space of the forest. Tom ran until exhaustion and stopped before a dead end of the maze. On the wall of plants in front of him, a line of text was sprayed in blood-red reflective paint. If you want to save her, bring Arthur Pendleton to the old sculpting studio at Jamestown Port before dawn. Otherwise, she will be petrified forever. Tom dropped to his knees on the ground, his breathing heavy. He realized he had fallen into the perfect trap set by the sculptor and his accomplice. They did not want to flee from the law. They wanted to use the FBI agents themselves to complete their ultimate artistic ritual. The boundary within Tom between a protector of justice and an accomplice to crime had never been so fragile. When darkness controls the mind, all beliefs collapse. Tom must make the most horrifying choice of his life: release the demon, or watch his colleague turn to stone? Tom Sterling returned to Arthur Pendleton's solitary confinement cell without reporting to his superiors. He knew that if the BSU found out about Evelyn's kidnapping, they would lock down the entire area, and that would provoke the killer into murdering her immediately. Tom walked into the cell, his face cold and ruthlessly terrifying. He pulled out his gun, placed it straight on the table, pointing the barrel toward Arthur. "You won, Arthur. Your accomplice has taken Evelyn. He wants me to trade you for her. Tell me, who is he?" Arthur looked at the gun, then up at Tom's face, which was filled with despair and frenzy. He let out a soft sigh. A deeply satisfied sigh, like a father seeing his child grow up exactly as expected. "Do you see, Tom? When facing the loss of someone you care about, you are willing to throw away that FBI badge. Willing to break every law to become a criminal just like me. The one holding Evelyn is not a stranger. He is my son, Julian Pendleton. I taught him everything about anatomy, about art, and about the purification of the soul since he was a child. You turned your own son into a monster just like you?" Tom gritted his teeth, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Arthur shook his head, his eyes gleaming with frenzied pride. "I did not turn him into a monster. I turned him into an artist greater than myself. Julian possesses a pair of genius hands that I never had. But he is still missing one thing: the experience of the death of someone with a powerful mind. Evelyn Vance is the perfect piece for his graduation project. Her mind is filled with pride and guilt when the plaster coat covers her body. She will create the most exquisite pose the world has ever seen." Arthur stood up, the metallic clanking of the iron chains ringing out piercingly. He brought his face close to Tom, just centimeters away from the gun barrel. "Uncuff me, Agent Sterling. Take me to Jamestown Port. Only I can tell Julian to stop before the final coat dries." "But do you know what that means? You will become an accomplice to a serial killer. Your name will be written into the FBI's black files as a traitor. Are you willing to trade your soul for that woman's life?" Tom stood rooted to the spot, Arthur's words like venomous needles piercing straight into his brain. His ability to empathize made him see the future. He uncuffs Arthur, and the two of them walk through the darkness like two companion demons, advancing toward the next blood sacrifice. The deserted Jamestown Port in the foggy night. A place where the waves crashing against the rocky shore create a sound like the mourning cries of imprisoned souls. The Ford Crown Victoria sped through the dark night, heading straight toward the deserted Jamestown Port. In the backseat, Arthur Pendleton sat with his hands now free. He did not try to escape at all, but instead leisurely gazed at the blurry scenery through the car window. Tom Sterling drove in absolute silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He had made his choice, a choice that would cast him into hell forever. He had betrayed his oath to justice to save Evelyn. They arrived at Jamestown Port at 4:30 in the morning. Abandoned warehouses stood side by side along the coast, rotting with time and salt air. The sound of waves crashing against the decaying wooden pilings created low, eerie noises beneath the thick fog. Arthur led Tom toward warehouse number 9, an old boat repair workshop that had been abandoned since the 1980s. When they stepped inside, the smell of chemicals and plaster was more pungent than anywhere they had ever been before. In the middle of the vast warehouse, under the light of suspended hurricane lamps, a horrifying scene was unfolding. Doi de la ban dik tieng an hong chin ba chin zak cho don ban tip theo kua ban. Dam bao giu nguyen ben noi dong. Cow truck cow ba bao kong ki kich ten. Kin d. Evelyn Vance was electro-shocked and fixed onto a vertical iron cross frame. Her entire lower body from her legs up to her chest had been covered in a thick layer of ivory white plaster, which was beginning to emit steam as the hardening process took place. Standing in front of her was a young man of about 25 years old, with a delicate face but empty, cold eyes identical to Arthur's. That was Julian Pendleton. In his hand was a large brush, meticulously applying the final strokes of white paint onto Evelyn's shoulders. Evelyn was still conscious, but her eyes clearly showed supreme agony as the plaster contracted and radiated heat, compressing her chest tightly and making it impossible for her to breathe normally. "Julian, stop your hand," Arthur Pendleton spoke up, his voice echoing throughout the warehouse. The young man stopped his brush, turning back to look at his father with a radiant smile. "Father, you are back. What do you think of my artwork? I improved your formula. This plaster layer contains fiberglass. It will never crack. Her soul will be imprisoned in here for hundreds of years." Julian completely ignored the gun held firmly in Tom's hand. He looked at Tom scoffingly. "Agent Sterling, did you come to witness the birth of a god? Look at her. She is no longer a mundane human being." Tom rushed forward, pointing the gun at Julian's head. "Let her go immediately. You frenzied bastard. I will blow your brains out if you take another step." But Julian only laughed out loud, a mad laughter blending with the sound of the ocean waves outside. In the life or death moment, the truth about Tom's criminal empathy awakens at its strongest. He must become a killer to understand how to defeat them. Julian Pendleton showed no fear before Tom's gun barrel. He slowly stepped closer to Evelyn, placing a razor-sharp scalpel right against her throat. "Go ahead and shoot me, Agent Sterling, but with just one slit from me. The blood from her carotid artery will spray directly into the plaster, creating a beautiful red trim. My father was right. You have the ability to see through us because you are just like us. You crave the power to control life and death. You are merely hiding behind that FBI badge to cover up your true nature." Tom felt as if his head were about to explode. His criminal empathy awakened to an unprecedented degree. For a moment, the space around him seemed to transform. He no longer saw himself as Tom Sterling. He saw himself in the guise of Julian, holding the scalpel and feeling the ultimate euphoria of watching life gradually fade from the victim's eyes. He understood their mindset. They did not kill out of pure cruelty, but because they felt powerless against the passage of time and the decay of the world. They wanted to create something eternal to prove their existence. This psychological resonance terrified Tom to his core, making him realize he was standing on the very brink of madness. "Tom, don't listen to him," Evelyn Vance managed to utter in a weak whisper, her breathing growing increasingly faint as the plaster on her chest began to harden and suffocate her lungs. He wants you to shoot. That is the final part of the exhibition, the downfall of an FBI agent." Evelyn looked at Tom with eyes full of pleading, not begging for her life, but begging him not to let himself be swallowed by the darkness. Arthur Pendleton stepped forward to stand beside his son, the two Pendletons standing there like two satanic statues under the hurricane light. "That is right, Tom. Fire the gun. End this game by becoming one of us. If you kill Julian, I will complete this statue, and you will have to live your entire life with Evelyn's image burned into your mind. Choose, Agent Sterling. Justice or ego?" Tom slowly lowered his gun, his eyes squeezed shut. He was searching for the single path of survival within the crazed psychological maze of this father and son duo of killers. He had to find the weakness in their artistic mindset to defeat them from within. Every artwork has a crack, and every killer has a psychological blind spot. Tom Sterling begins to shatter the pride of the sculptors. Doi de la ban dik tieng an hon chin ba chin zak cho don ban tip theo kua ban. Dam bao giu nguyen ben noi dung. Kao truck kao va sak tai dan tape. Nia mai kua nyan bat. Tom Sterling opened his eyes, the frenzy and panic on his face vanished, replaced instead by a bone-chilling calmness. He looked straight at Arthur and Julian, then let out a soft laugh, low, ironic laughter filled with utter contempt. This laugh caused both of the Pendletons to look momentarily surprised and uneasy. "You call yourselves great artists?" Tom took a step forward, his voice ringing out steel-hard. "Arthur, you say you want to correct God's mistakes, that you want to turn humans into something eternal. But look back at your works. Maria, Charlotte, that judge, and Evelyn too, they are not art. They are merely evidence of your powerlessness and fear in the face of death. That plaster coat of Julian's contains fiberglass. Right? It will never crack? Wrong. Under the impact of the salt air and humidity from this Jamestown sea, the calcium carbonate in your formula will decompose within just 5 years. These statues will rot, turning into foul-smelling, gray lumps of mud. Your masterpieces will turn into a worthless pile of garbage. Shut up. What do you know about art? Julian screamed, his delicate face instantly distorting with rage. Tom's words had struck the greatest weakness in the psychology of a megalomaniac killer: pride in the perfection of their work. He could not accept his creation being viewed as flawed or garbage. The scalpel in his hand drifted slightly away from Evelyn's throat as he turned toward Tom. "Julian, don't let him manipulate you." Arthur shouted a warning, but it was already too late. Crazed pride had clouded the young man's reason. Julian rushed straight at Tom with the scalpel in hand, wanting to slash the veins of the man who dared insult his art. Waiting for exactly this moment, Tom's field agent instincts kicked back in. He did not fire his gun at Julian. He ducked to evade the knife strike, brutally grabbed Julian's arm, and used a shoulder lock to wrench his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees on the warehouse floor. At the same time, Tom pulled a backup taser from his belt and fired 2 prongs straight into Julian's chest. The high-voltage current caused the young killer to convulse violently before blacking out on the dirty ground. The case closed in the shadows of classified vaults. There were no medals, no words of praise. There was only the lifelong obsession remaining for those who survived. Arthur Pendleton watched his son collapse. He did not rush forward to save him but merely stood still, a bitter smile appearing on his lips. He knew the game was over. Tom did not hesitate for a single second. He lunged toward Evelyn, using a nearby iron hammer to frantically smash the hardening plaster layer around her body. The shattered fragments of white plaster fell to the floor, making dull, dry sounds. Evelyn collapsed into Tom's arms, gasping for air as the rush of fresh oxygen filled her lungs. Saving her life in the nick of time, the FBI reinforcement units, having tracked the secret GPS device that Tom had intentionally left in the car, stormed into the warehouse with red and blue flashing lights and sirens echoing across the entire Jamestown port. 3 weeks after the horrific kidnapping at Jamestown port, all traces of the Sculptor case completely vanished from all government archival systems. Arthur and Julian Pendleton were transferred to a classified, off-the-grid solitary confinement facility in the Nevada desert, where they would spend the rest of their lives in white rooms, never to see the light of the sun again. Judge Miller and the other victims were buried under aliases, with their causes of death announced as traffic accidents. The case file was stamped, destroyed, and placed deepest within the Bureau's Black Files vault. Tom Sterling sat alone in his dark office late at night at Quantico. On his desk was a glass of strong whiskey and 2 deep blue sapphires, the only pieces of evidence he kept from the case, taken from the eyes of the first victim at the abandoned church. The office door softly opened, and Evelyn Vance walked in. Her health had recovered, but a faint scar from Julian's scalpel still remained on her neck, and her eyes had lost their former rational pride, replaced instead by a deep, lingering melancholy. "You haven't gone home yet, Tom?" Evelyn sat down in the chair opposite him, looking at the glass of whiskey on the table. Tom remained silent for a long time, then pushed the glass toward her. "I'm thinking about what Arthur said before, Evelyn, about the basement inside each of us. He was right about one thing. When we look too long into the darkness looks back at us. I saved you. I saved myself from becoming a killer. But my soul, it seems to have been petrified in that warehouse at Jamestown port that day." Evelyn looked at the 2 sapphires glittering under the desk lamp, her fingers gently touching the scar on her neck. "We cannot forget, Tom. That is the price to pay to keep the outside world believing that monsters are not real. This case has ended, but the Black Files never truly close. Out there are still other sculptors waiting for us beneath new fogs." The story closed in the dense silence of the late night at Quantico, where the ticking of the wall clock sounded like the footsteps of death, still leisurely pacing in the dark. And that concludes the next chapter of the Black Files here at No Sleep Studio. Every mystery has an answer. But some truths are better left buried forever. What are your thoughts on the man who sculpts people in today's story? Let the studio know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next thrilling cases. And now, goodbye everyone. Sleep tight, if you can.